Bangladesh at 50. Some of you may have seen this before. It's a collection of stories on the occasion of Bangladesh's 50th anniversary, edited by Shazia Omar on Dhaka Flow. And previously, at previous Dhaka Flows, what we have done is the writers have read from their work from the anthology. Hello, can you hear me? Everybody can hear me. Okay, great. So today, in the spirit of the new Bangladesh, we've decided to do something a little bit different. And our writers, so introduce in a moment, are going to read new work that reflects on how far we've come and how far we still have to go. And then we will have a discussion about the role of the writer in this Bangladesh that we are trying to create. Because at a time when there are so many forces, there's so many different forces, some of them dark, trying to define what Bangladesh is and tell our stories, it's more important than ever that we give space, we raise up, we create platforms for Bangladeshi voices and Bangladeshi stories from a diversity of backgrounds. So, the importance of storytelling and the importance of writers in Bangladesh. Let me go ahead and introduce our panelists. The way that this is going to work is that each of the panelists is going to read an excerpt from their work, and then we'll discuss it. We'll have one or two questions, and we'll go on to the next panelist. The session is going to be 45 minutes, so we'll have 30 minutes for the discussion, and then we'll open it up to the audience questions. So our panelists today are Guzanti, a writer columnist in the for stories that have been published in the UK, France, Germany, Austria, the USA, Canada, Nigeria, India, Pakistan, Nepal, and Bangladesh. She's a writer resident for the Commonwealth Writers. Her stories were placed in the Commonwealth Short Story Competition in 2010. Her current project is the expanded edition of a short story collection, Fragments of Riverside, which features several new pieces of short stories and flash fiction and slated for release this month. So today, Carly is going to read from her expanded short story collection as well as a piece of short fiction.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. As Shahira just mentioned, the anniversary edition is coming out this month of Fragments of River Song from Nymphia Publication. And it's got 14 new stories, several of which are flash fiction. So I decided that I would read one piece of flash fiction first, which is not from the book, but gives you an idea of the kind of stories. Those are, the ones in the book are longer and more plot-driven than this. This piece is called Learning Your Lessons. I had long been aware that our English teacher, Mrs. Anas, disliked me. Without understanding why, I suspected that it was because I was inconveniently bilingual, having lived in London for a few years at the age of 4. I didn't realize that her aversion to me was less about my language skills and more about her lack of them. Because although our school was run by American nuns, the Bangladeshi teachers weren't always fluent in English. Still, the English teacher probably should have been. In class 5, Mrs. Anas often went to absurd lengths to criticize me. On that day, she insisted I got the spelling of dusk wrong. Apparently, it was spelled D-A-S-K. When I argued against having my marks cut for my alleged mistake, Mrs. Anas told me to go and check the dictionary. I skipped off, happy for any excuse to visit the school library. It was my favorite place, and we were only allowed there once a week. Alas, the librarian did not seem to share my enthusiasm. Well, obviously, it's spelled D-U-S-K. What a silly question, she said sternly. When I repeated the conversation to Mrs. Anas, she went an alarming shade of purple. Fearing an outburst, I offered a preemptive, "Sorry, miss," apologizing for what I wasn't entirely sure. Luckily, it diffused the situation. Giving me a sharp look to check for insubordination, Mrs. Anas graciously declared, "Well, it can be spelled both ways. So I won't deduct your marks for spelling it with a U this time." Radiating outward innocence, I returned to my desk, quietly gloating at having schooled my English teacher in English. The second piece I'm going to read is an excerpt from one of the stories in the collection. It's called Southern Exposure, and it is about a Bangladeshi student in London who has to deal with an unwanted guest, an American friend who visits during the Christmas holidays in Dhaka. In this scene, they're visiting an NGO office to meet with the director. What kind of snakes would you like to have? The gentleman asked us. Do you prefer savory or sweet? Knowing that he could not be dissuaded from offering us food, I replied politely, anything you have will be fine. As he left the room, I turned to Steve and whispered, just eat whatever snacks they offer us. He'd had a funny look on his face even before I spoke to him, but my instructions to eat were met with transparent horror. I had just enough time to explain that in Bangladeshi culture, it was deeply insulting to refuse hospitality before the director returned. To my relief, Steve managed to devour with apparent enjoyment 2 bowls of a rice pudding so sickeningly sweet that it risked making diabetics swoon for miles around just by virtue of proximity. When I later asked him why he had looked so worried when I told him that we had to eat the snacks, his reaction provoked me into a level of rage that was nearly life-threatening, to Steve as well as to myself. Well, I heard him mention snakes, so I got worried, Mira. Then you said he meant snacks, so that was a relief. But you looked so serious when you said that we had to eat whatever was on offer that I panicked all over again. But what did you think they were going to feed us? I asked, puzzled. Well, I saw Indians eating live monkey brains in that Steven Spielberg movie, you know? I think it was Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Anyway, I was worried that he might give us something like that, Steve said, sheepishly. Deafened by the sound of my grinding teeth, I counted to 10, reminding myself yet again that Americans were infamous for their shortcomings with regard to geography, and that there was no point in taking it personally. Thank you. Oh, super.
Thank you, Barb. So can you tell us a little bit about why you chose to read these pieces, and in particular, a piece of flash fiction, which is a kind of a new literary genre, right?
Yeah, I think because I chose flash fiction as I chose it for the book as well, because a lot of people believe that you just cannot tell a story in 250 words or 500 words or 1,000. And I actually believe this myself when it first began. But I discovered that it's a really interesting form for a writer because it challenges you to tell a story with a minimum number of words. And it really teaches you to cut out the excess. Because in a novel, you can write pages which are not noticed. In a short story, we have some sentences. In Flash, there's just no room for it. And I think it's an underrated and very interesting form. So that's why I chose that. And in terms of the choice of the pieces, I think because people who are here, I hope, love reading, love books, and love language. And I think there's just so much fun to be had with both what we do with English, what others do with English, and what we do interculturally, which doesn't always have to be something dramatic and terrible and othering, but can actually be quite funny and relatable.
So when we spoke earlier, Bara, you were telling me that it's important to put stories out there that right
That idea.
that aren't the expected narratives that people are they have in their minds. It's just like different stories of deprivation, a disaster, but instead what you chose to share with us today are just there's stories about relationships, stories about ordinary human beings that anybody, no matter where they're from, could relate to. Could you speak about that a little bit, like why that is so important to you to put these kinds of stories out into the world as a accomplished writer?
Yeah, I think because Bangladesh is one of those countries that's not very well understood outside our borders, and people have some very strange ideas. And, there are realities about poverty or about violence or about traffic, which are very much part of our everyday life. but that's not all there is to it. And I think when you look at also, especially the difficulties, you kind of descend into stereotypes, and that's very easy. That's very easy to settle, and it's very easy to buy. And I find it very frustrating because Bangladesh, like pretty much every other country, every other individual, is nuanced, and you deserve that kind of equal prayer. So that's why and for me, it's very, as you very quickly picked up, relationships are core to my storytelling. So, for example, if you look at in Fragments of River Song, there are some instances of stories which technically could be considered sad because they deal with issues like violence or domestic violence, for example. But what is really interesting to me is actually the people, and I know many of them, and they're not necessarily of privileged class or background, who choose to do something different with the hand that they are dealt. And those are the people that I'm particularly interested in terms of telling their stories and in terms of making it clear that Bangladesh has these stories. It's not just, doom and disaster and floods and famine and God knows what. We deal with all of those things, but there is so much more to it. And two quick things I'd like to say in Rapida. When I was a student in London at the Grand Student Economics, someone who became a very good friend of mine, who at that time considered himself very enlightened, he was Australian, said to me, and I thought he was joking, he said, "How many wives does your father have?" And I swear I thought it was a joke. So I said, 4, but my mother's the only one who lives in the capital city. The others he keeps in the provinces because, we're not allowed to have all the wives in the same house. And he said, "Oh, is that difficult?" And I said, "No, not really." That's what I realized he was serious. I said, "No, not really. My brother and I had the only kids, so we don't really have a lot of problems with the other wives, and we don't really see them." Started laughing. And he got very upset. He said, "Are you taking the piss out of me?" And I said, "Yes. Because really, if you think that my father has 4 wives, is it likely that he's going to send his daughter off by herself to study economics? There is a causal logic here that's missing, and that is often missing in the stories that are told about Bangladesh. And also in that regard, I have a story that hasn't yet been published, but I hope to do it soon. And it's about a young girl, a teenager, very fascinated by the woman in her village, who is referred to as the village night woman, who has mental health issues. And she becomes very preoccupied with trying to find out whether that woman was always like that or something actually happened to her. And so I wrote the story, and it's one that's very close to my heart. It got picked up by an American journal, quite a well-known one, and I was thrilled. They helped me work with it. And then when the board was about to okay the story, they said to me, "Can you add a character that's a social worker?" And I said, "No, we don't have social workers for mental health issues, not in the cities, in the villages." And they said, "Well, we need a social worker character so that I can be discriminate." And I said, "I'm sorry, I can't do that." They said, "No, people know." I said, "I don't know. Apart from people in Bangladesh, really, I don't know." And this is the kind of difficulty you face as the writer writing from, quote, the periphery. If you won't dumb down, or if you won't change your stories to a more palatable form to a Western audience, you won't get put down. And I think it's probably one of the things you will bring up with us at some point, but I think it's one of the challenges that we face as writers in this part of the world. A lot of people make the compromise and provide what's talented, and some people don't. And if you don't, then they're frustrated.
Thank you very much. So next, Sal being a mom is going to share with us an excerpt from his memoir. Sal started out late in his writing career, after a career in international finance, looking all around the world. But he hopes that his experiences all over the world, high and low, feed into his fiction and other writing. He's currently finalizing and looking for a publisher for his memoir, My 5-Year Paper Life. Okay, Sal, would you like to?
Can I just test? It's okay? This mic's okay? Okay. This is my memoir about the late 60s, long time ago, and followed by my experience in the Liberation War of 71. So as the story opens, I'm in Sylhet, and I'm planning to cross the border to go over to India because the Pakistani army tanks are close. Because they attacked Dhaka in March, but they came up slowly up north, and they were within few days of reaching where I was. On April 11, we piled into Dee's car at twilight, a particularly depressing time of day to embark upon any venture. We proceeded without much chatter for about half an hour, through the trees and bushes of one tea garden after another, as the light faded into dense darkness. Next minute, anticlimax. The car reared to a stop. Dee fiddled with the engine, but it was no use. We got out and started walking. Hardly had we turned a few corners when we saw lights, a large bungalow on a hillock. Even from a distance, we could see that it was a hive of activity. Strange, in the middle of nowhere, what was going on? It turned out that we were in Teliapara Tea Estate, and this bungalow was serving as the headquarters of the remnants of 2 EBR regiments. In other words, it was the center of the military activity of all Bangladeshi resistance forces in the whole region. Dee's face turned white and he quickly made every excuse to vanish from the scene. I, on the contrary, couldn't believe my luck. This was exactly where I wanted to be, among the type of soldiers who had started fighting in Chittagong some weeks ago. Heroes to my mind. I was taken in hand by Captain Nurul Islam Shishu, second in command, who had a perpetual half smile, masking total knowledge of what was going on everywhere. He and the other officers decided to take me under their wing. In a large room, there were about 15 young Bengalis who had volunteered to take up arms in the liberation effort. Mattress beds were strewn all over the floor. Just like me, the others were mostly in their early 20s. Some were from urban, lower middle class backgrounds, while many others had come straight from the rural homes. Each one of them was infused with fighting spirit, which made me hope I would also be able to do my bit. I was now in the world of the streets, of rough means in which voices were louder, personal space minimal to non-existent, conflicts always close to the surface. It was not an evil world, but it needed to be navigated with care. Far from the polished halls of Harvard, I was inhabiting the lower rungs of what was then a very poor third world country. Furthermore, it was wartime, when morals and inhibitions are prone to slippage anyway. A few days later, when Shishu asked to see me, I was not completely unprepared. "Do you know how to eat with your hands?" he began. Not that well," I said, flustered. I had been back from the West less than a year, and it was true that my style of eating rice and curry by hand was not as yet perfectly natural. "And how good is your Bengali?" Everyone knew that my spoken Bengali in those days was riddled with odd grammatical mistakes, though I could usually get my meaning across. "So what? What's this all about?" I said belligerently. "Next, nothing, except that there's a soldier, Rahmat Khan of Moin's group, very dark-skinned with a mustache, who is going around saying that you're not one of us, that you're from the Paki side." "Oh, I see," I said quietly, a bit scared. "What can I do about it?" "Well, I am going to call Rahmat Khan in later today, and I will put this gun to his head," he said, putting his officer's pistol on the table. "Will that help? They all know me. When I threaten that I will shoot him in the balls, he will get the message. But anyway, you should carry this around from now on," he said, putting his arm behind his back and bringing out a firearm. He put it in my hands. "This is a submachine gun. It's your personal gun. Keep it carefully with you. Don't give it to anyone. And don't use it unless you really have to." I looked at it fascinated. When I picked it up, it was light and fitted nicely in my grip. It was stubby, made of black steel with a curved magazine attached. It was of Chinese make, of the AK-47 family. Next morning, when I was finally allowed to shoot at some trees about 50 yards away, The bullets flowed smoothly and powerfully. I was thrilled by the delicately balanced trigger. The slightest touch, and it unleashed a taut sputter of dark blasting, like a liquid stream speeding away from me, twisting and turning. It made me feel strong, even invincible. Thank you. Shifu, another Shifu.
You too.
Thank you, Sal. So I think the excerpt that you read, it really captures sort of the youthful spirit of revolutionary time, the idealism, the naivete, a lot of innocence there. You know, it's exciting, it's funny, but, you know, there's, you know, that what's around the corner is the velocities. So I'd like to ask you, you know, your story, so bringing out your memoir, you know, late 1960s, the student uprising, into the Liberation War, your role in it. How does it fit in our pantheon of 1971 literature? And, you know, what is the value of telling this story in your particular way? Because I think it's a little bit different than, you know, a lot of the work that we're familiar with from 1971. So what are you adding here uniquely?
Well, it was mainly to express my experience of the war. A lot of people have written about 71, but there have been many historians, as far as I can see. And they've researched it very well, and they've done all the readings and all, and they've written books about what happened then. Except there have been a lot of memoirs by military people who've actually written about the war, about their own experience in the war, but that have been completely military. You know, they've been talking about this. We had a sniper attack here, and we had so I tried to put in a little more because I was an amateur. I was not a military person. I just ended up in the war. So I wanted to give my experience and to get you the feeling of what it was like, including the political events. And because I was luckily I happened to be at Sheikh Mujib's speech of 7th March and many other turning points. So I'm trying to convey to everyone what it was like to live in that time, you know, which is also what I did for the first part of the book. The first part of the book was about the 70s, it's about the late 60s, right. The golden period, 66 to 1970, the Beatles and Woodstock and drugs and everything that happened then. So that also I tried to explain because many young people come to me and say what it was like then, you know. So I want to leave behind a record of a little bit of what it was like to experience all that and to live it through. So that was the main object of my writing. Also, I would like to say it's linked to a little bit what's going on, what happened 2 months ago. Because for me, the thing that made the Liberation War a success for us was the way that the people of the country were totally united.
Right.
Their energy was one block, you know, not always. Bangladeshis have always been very contentious and they've been never had a united front. But in that period, 68, 69, 70, you know, Bangladesh people became almost united. Their energy was one, you know. And on top of that, we had the cyclone. The cyclone played a huge role, you know. I mean, that's what many people don't understand today. But the cyclone was really the defining thing that brought everything together. So that's what I experienced again during Bangladesh 2.0. There was this again, why did we win? We won because everybody was united. The energy was all one. And the people were united. That's why the army, you know, decided there's no point fighting back, you know. It was too powerful a united strength. So that's what I would hope that we learn from my experience, that we should keep this unity. That's the only way we can survive. We're going through difficult times right now, but keep the unity.
National unity. But Professor Yunus is also, you know, going around having consultations with different political parties and religious groups, religious leaders and student leaders on right now, national unity. So yeah, let's say if there's one thing that we can take away from today, national unity. Let's go on to Niman Appa. So Niman Appa, Niman Soman is an Italy-based Bangladeshi fiction writer, poet, columnist, and a teacher of languages. She writes in English, and her fiction has appeared in many anthologies and literary journals within the subcontinent. So her published work includes a collection of short stories, Piazza Bangladesh, a volume of poetry, Calligraphy of Wet Leaves, and earlier a collection of 3 decades of her column writing for Bangladesh's The Daily Star. about daily life in Rome, and that's called An Abiding City, Ruminations from Rome. Presently, she is looking for a publisher for her debut novel, The Hidden Names of Things, that encompasses the history of Bangladesh.
Okay. Shall I use this?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hello? Can you hear me? Okay. Hi everyone. Assalamu alaikum and thank you for being here. I'll be reading an excerpt from my my debut novel, as Shahira also said, that has been in gestation for the last 15 years and is now almost finished and hopefully ready for publication. It's called The Hidden Names of Things, and it's an intergenerational story, a fictional narrative about the factual history of Bangladesh evolving from its past, in British India, the partition of 47, emerging as East Pakistan and its traumatic transition through the Liberation War of 1971, leading up to the 1990s. It's serendipitous, I would say, that my story stops where a dictatorship, albeit a military one, is overthrown in my novel, almost anticipating the more recent reversal of another autocratic regime. And the reason I chose the excerpt is because this particular passage, there are many other themes in my novel, but this deals in an oblique way about how grief, loss, death, even presumed death, and the disappearance of loved ones in my novel during the war, but generally as collateral damage during any war, man-made socio-political disruptions and destructions, a violent uprising, a revolution such as the one in August, how this can affect families. In my novel, the two main protagonists, a mother and daughter, deal with the disappearance and unverified death of a son and brother who was a freedom fighter, Mukti Jodha, how they deal with it in different ways. In the excerpt, we will see that the daughter or sister, Tareen, who is a writer, finds the act of writing her way towards hope, healing, and acceptance. This happened in 1971 in my novel, but could be applicable to any other period and in any other land. I'm going to read in an elliptical way bits from 2 chapters. It shouldn't take more than 5 minutes, I assure you. Chapter 5, Dhaka, 1995. Bhaiya, it's been 4 days since we buried Amma. No, it's not working.
No.
Hello, yeah. I woke up wondering why there is no special name for crucial days like today. Tareen puts away her diary. It was the day after the Kul, with all the rituals over. It was the first regular day in their lives to be called post-Amma. Today, Tareen felt the house truly emptied of her mother. This was also her younger sister Mahin's last day in Dhaka. At the breakfast table, Tareen turned to her sister. Mini, do you remember those days? The 9 months of Ekattor, 1971? You mean, do I ever think about them? No, Apu. It's finished, over. How can it be over for us? Tareen looked hurt. Well, it's all better left buried, Mahin said, then sighed. Oh, Apu, you know what I mean. Why do you want to scratch at the scabs? Really, you should erase the painful parts. That's the only way our generation can survive, by moving on. Well, Amma managed with a dose of religion. Tareen, chin in hand, sat unhearing. Whatever the pain or danger, she needed to plunge into the turbid waters of the past, cast a dragnet haul back those days, the alligator days that had eaten up her brother. She needed to find some clue to what happened to him. Maheen said softly, Bhaiya, they never found his body. Whatever. Maheen stood up. Oh gosh. Sorry. Hello. Chapter 81. In the days following her brother's disappearance, Tareen wrote day and night, as if language were a refuge. She crafted her escape from grief in signs and symbols, verbal images and dreamscapes. She addressed her brother Azim both in her daily diary and the notebook of her memoir novel. Bhaiya, by the torchlight of my words, I go searching for you through the villages where you were last sighted before being caught, where you might have slipped away from your captors. Page upon page, I follow your scent through muddy paths that lead out of my sentences, through jhao and shal forests, bamboo groves, thatched vines of pumpkin and gourd, night dark in the afternoon shade. Squawking hens and naked children ran around some women near the pond. Perhaps after a flock of shalik exploded like tufts of cotton in a blue-quilted sky, the women startled at your footsteps, saw you wounded and leaning on a comrade. Perhaps you stopped there for a night. Perhaps she gave you refuge, that woman there in the green cotton sari. Did she feed you, hide you under the bed? From my distant paragraph, I see the mud courtyards of village homesteads. The old men turn to me with bleary eyes, which hide the tears for the sons dragged out and shot behind the hut. There, they show me. I look at where they point. The vines shiver. The eyes of the old men are boats trembling upon a moonlit river. I look across the expanse. Do I spy you, barefoot and fleeing? Bhaiya, in the first few years of your vanishing, Amma said, I defy death. I do not believe in its existence. I believe only in life. I gave birth, and my womb was witness to its weight and throb. I accept only the reality of breathing, of the cry of beginnings. I can acknowledge pain, loss even, but I will not accommodate the smug finality of endings. I too wrote somewhere, I deny death, its self-important posturing. In love and memory, we defeat our diminishing. Bhaiya, I will not let you go. You will accompany me till we seek out this usurper of life. Not abstract death that merely erases our footprints from the sands of existence, but the demons disguised in human form that terrorize us, dare to delete our dreams, our eternal truths. That is the enemy to seek out, not just the one with the gun, but the one that crushes our hope, our future. Thank you.
Wow. Lovely.
Thank you, Niman. Thank you, Niman Appa. So your work brings up themes of dreams that have been crushed or deferred. So loss, grief, and trauma. So as a writer, how do you think telling stories helps us heal and move on both individually and as a nation? What's the importance of stories?
Thank you, Shahira. In fact, the excerpt I read out, exactly addresses this. But as I said, there are many, many other threads and themes that run through my novel. And I took such a long time to write it because we, from our generation, like Sal and I and many others here, who were born in the 50s, who lived through the 60s and saw the 70s and the War of Liberation. And then after that, everything has been on fast forward until even now. So we haven't really been able to integrate, to internalize all the changes that have happened. And I can only say as a writer, and one of my protagonists, Tareen, who is like an alter ego for me, finds writing, the act of writing, to able to communicate to others all the trauma and all the things that have happened, not just in her life, but all around her, is the only way to hope. So I have always felt storytelling is one of the most important ways we have to keep connecting to all the, our hearts, all the things that happen outside us and, inside us. So I hope this novel, when it comes out, will be able to, to say all the things that I have wanted to say across these years. And of course, living in Italy, I'm always trotted out as the Italian who's also Bangladeshi, the Bangladeshi who's also, an Italian. So in academic or any other panels, I would say, I'm asked to talk about Bangladesh, even as things are happening. And I've always said, when I said it in this last time there was a round table, and I said, I was 17 in 1971, and I'm 70 during this time of great change, and I'm older, but thankfully not wiser. And I'm here. I was with the youth in those times in 71, and I'm solidly behind the new Bangladesh that's hopefully emerging for a final time in an evolved way. Thank you.
That's very powerful. Thank you. And now we have Zishan Khan. So Zishan is a writer and a lawyer. He has at times also been a journalist and a communications officer. I got to know Zishan when we were working together actually at the Rohingya Cultural Memory Center in Cox's Bazar, where he was documenting Rohingya culture and Rohingya stories and helping bring those stories to the outside world to change people's perceptions of the Rohingya. So he has very diverse interests and skills. He enjoys photography, sports, music, and motorcycles, but he would mostly want to be known as a traveler. Please, let us know what you're going to share with us today, Zishan.
Thank you, Sharia, for that glowing introduction, and also for the opportunity to work with you at the IOM, which was a wonderful space. I'm going to read from a book that I'm working on at the moment, and it's historical fiction, for those of you who like that. It's interesting because it also deals with upheaval and revolutions of a sort, but from a much older time, from the 1300s in here. So it's interesting that you see a lot of patterns re-emerge, and you see a lot of things happen as they have always happened here. And I think what we've just recently witnessed is another example of how things constantly churn in Bengal, if you like. Anyway, it's a bit long, so I hope you can bear with me. I'm reading a whole chapter, and it's the first time I've read it. It's the first time I've actually unveiled this book, so I'm nervous and excited. Chapter 4, Tongtro, the province of Laknaudi, 1335. Where has it come from, this Tongtro? How old is it? Who created it? How can I trace its path? So many questions, my shade. I wish I could tell you for sure, but much of it is lost in the mist where myth and fact collide. Perhaps no one created it. Perhaps it always was. I think all perception is myth and fact, young Amitabh. And it's often hard to tell in what measure each exists in our understanding of truth. I do too, and I'd like to believe there is more truth in myth than we are comfortable considering. We rely too much on what the mind can grasp. Yes, Wales denies us direct access to that other wisdom, unfortunately. Though Wales not walled, are they? Acha, এখন খাও. I should stop interrupting your lunch. Amitabh is a Shaulya disciple. He's visiting Osman at the site of his new Khanqa. Thank you. Having wandered across Lucknowti and Sonargaon for nearly 6 years, Osman has begun establishing a base near the city to practice and propagate his tariqa, the Chishti tradition in which he has been trained. It is being constructed at the far end of a large reservoir, and though his following is nascent, he has already built a langar, a free kitchen, from which he feeds at least once a day, and irrespective of their faiths, castes, stations, or origins, anyone who requires a meal. His kitchen relies on donations, and many well-to-do families view it as a convenient way to fulfill the duty of almsgiving, or zakat. And in the nearly 8 months that it has been running, he has never had to turn anyone away. Osman likes to serve all his visitors personally, and he keeps a generous amount of khichdi onto a plate for Amitabh. The pair escape the midday heat under a sonal tree in bloom, its fallen yellow flowers adorning the grass on which they sit. I'm happy to indulge you, Sheikh. You take an interest in our Dharma, which many of the newer converts to Islam, while many of the newer converts to Islam turn their backs on it. Perhaps I can't properly tell you where it comes from, Osman, but I can tell you where it leads. It leads to where there are no boundaries between spirit and matter, between subject and object. There is nothing sacred nor profane, nothing separating the spiritual from the sensual. Only the mind as it is, both pure and void. Mohammudah. That seems a bit messy. That's because you're pitting it against tidy. That's duality. Just teasing on it. In our Dharma, if I can appropriate the word, we have a similar view and try to grasp it using the term wahada, which means absolute unity, and kasrat, which means multiplicity. Absolute unity is of course our belief in the fact that everything is contained within the one, that there is nothing except the one. Kasrat is the expansion of the one, expressed as abundance and variety. It's a little different from yours, but bear with me. At the level of absolute unity, there is neither night nor day, neither male nor female, neither disease nor healing, neither subject nor object, neither creator nor creation. There is no duality. When the soul embraces absolute unity, there is no other. This is the state where non-manifestation reveals itself, what you call the void. We describe this state as Hu, a word that allows us to attribute no characteristics to God. From here, it is impossible to talk about something in relation to another thing, nor of nothing, as that too is the opposite of something. There can be no otherness, or whatever you want to call it. There can only be is. Perhaps that's a little like your Mohammudah. Yes, Sheikh, perhaps. Not so different, but neither makes much sense from the perspective of a rational mind. And people will think we've lost it if we talk like this. Hey, this picture is good. The Lucknow that Tata Osman Siyasati has returned to is very different from the one he left several years ago. It is not an independent sultanate anymore, and bears the marks of its subjugation in nearly every aspect of public life. This is done by strict design. The capital in Delhi is well aware of Lucknow's separatist tendencies, and is determined to stand its authority over the troublesome territory. The locals of Borendro, Gore, and Bongo are forced to endure humiliating checks as they go about their daily lives. Barricades exist at nearly every junction in the city. Tughlaq soldiers have been given a free hand to use excessive force liberally, and routinely harassed anybody who displays a slight bit of courage or, in fact, confidence. Public, gruesome executions for simple offenses are commonplace. Brutality, intimidation, and fear are actively employed as tools of governance in Lucknow, Sonargaon, and Shangaon. And there is real terror in the hearts of its people, along with an increasing poverty, as the wealth and uses of these prosperous lands are carried away to fill the Sultan's coffers in Delhi. On top of this, there is a marked increase in the number of Muslim settlers, many of whom have come from the Delhi Sultanate as survivors of the genocidal havoc wreaked by the Mongol Chengiz and his sons. They are traumatized, desperate and fearful of the local population who profess a range of faiths, speak in a different language, and are darker skinned and ethnically unfamiliar. These displaced people, mostly Pashtun, Uzbek, and Turkey, are determined to establish some sort of dominance in their new home. They use Islam and an aggressive physicality to push down the locals, who are, for the most part, less fierce. This is actively encouraged by the government, which is keen to establish racial hierarchies they can comfortably exploit. Ethnic and religious tensions are at an all-time high. Qadir Khan, Delhi's man in Lucknow, rules his feet with an iron fist. Any possibility of rebellion has been all but snuffed out. But over in Sonargaon, which grows even more wealthy on its maritime presence, Muhammad Tughlaq's grip is becoming a lot more tenuous. The great Qadir Khan, vanquished Sir Sultan, rules the province autonomously and entirely. But he is nearing his end. As long as he lives, no one in Sonargaon will challenge his authority. But when he dies, and he will die soon, there can be no vacuum, as the province is on the brink of a revolt. The main contender for the post is a man called Fakhruddin Mubarak, affectionately known as Fakhra, by the people, among whom he is very popular. He is the commander of the armory, and though ethnically a Turk, he was born in Bongo, or Bangala, as the region is also called, and speaks the Bengali language. His family served in Bahadur Shah's administration, and he watched as his leader, the heroic Sultan of Sonargaon, was mercilessly tortured before being put to a sadistic death. Like many others in his mulk, he has contempt for the Tughlaq rule and views himself as representing a local sovereign order. And so it happens. In 1337, Tatar Khan, Tatar-e-Azam Bahram Khan, the most feared man in the land, gives up the ghost and leaves the seat of power in Sonargaon precariously vacant. Missing not a single beat, Fakhruddin Mubarak declares Sonargaon independent again and proclaims himself its most able and worthy Sultan. The country erupts in roaring relief. Malik Bahadur Shah has risen again. Sultan Fakhra has come to restore us to glory. There appears to be no one who possesses the support or the desire to confront him, and the Sultanate of Sonargaon is rebirthed in very little trouble at all. But in Lucknow and Shahjahan, the wheels of the imperial apparatus are already in motion. This moment has been foreseen, and Muhammad Tughlaq's machinations to maintain his power over the lucrative eastern province are about to be put into practice. Yeah.
I'm afraid we have to wrap up now. It's past 2. We have another panel.
That's amazing.
So that, unfortunately, because we started a little bit late, and there's another panel that needs to start. That doesn't really leave us with any time for discussion.
5 minutes.
Yeah,
Thank you.
because we started late.
I'm about 2 minutes in.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Others don't.
Am I okay? Cool.
Please go.
The moment has been foreseen, and Muhammad Tughlaq's machinations to maintain his hold over the lucrative eastern province are about to be put into practice. Qadir Khan and the somewhat less remarkable governor of Shahjahan, Izzaduddin Yahya, combined forces to march on Sonargaon. They are joined by Firoz Khan, the governor of nearby Kara, who has been sent by Delhi to ensure a crushing victory. It is vital that the fire is put out swiftly, or else the entire place could be engulfed in the flames of a liberation movement. The Sultanate of Sonargaon, 1338. Sultan Fakhra moves purposefully around the room, and as he studies the charts of his territory and contemplates his response to the news of an imminent attack. His robes billow around him like the cheeks of an athlete, drawing breath at the height of the sport. His dagger is out, and he waves it around as he talks, occasionally plunging it into the table to send vases and porcelain pots to their clamorous demise in the floor below. It is menacing. Fakhruddin Shah is frustrated because of the arrival of Firoz Khan, and is unsure about being able to hold up an attack in this season where the land is dry enough to accommodate a cavalry charge. He calls out for his war minister, who is equally perplexed and pacing through his own circles around the charts of the table. Give me my all. I want it brutally, no platitudes. Firoz will bring war horses from Kara, and they will, unfortunately, decide the battle in Qadir Khan's favor. But Qadir's own soldiers are not especially committed to him. He treats his men with contempt and is consumed with a sense of its own importance. He is also of low birth and cannot resist the temptations of riches. When he gains control of Sharaga, he will become drunk with greed. And this is something we can use to our advantage. When? What do you mean when? What sort of advice is this? Have you already declared us defeated? You wanted it straight, my lord, so here it is. We are likely to lose the capital in the first offensive, and they will come in across the sandbanks that form the Jumna at this time of the year. With miles of land to carry sea before they reach us, we will be overwhelmed by the sheer force of their charge. We will be able to hold on to most of the territory and the Meghna is still deep enough to stop them from getting to the eastern part of Bangala. Tala will consider this a victory and will return home. He will want to plunder Shuranga, so we should be beginning to load up our ships and float them down to Chatpur, where they will be safe and stopped. Tala is a short-sighted man. He will do something to compromise himself. We just need to wait and seize upon this opportunity. Fine, I will do as you advise. Send the ships to Chatpur, but I will not retreat. We will fight. That's it.
Thank you so much.
Oh my
Thank you so
goodness,
much
I
for
love
the
it.
comments. And to our audience, does anybody have
This will
take
go.
one question?
Yeah.
Anybody have a question?
Absolutely.
Any questions?
Because you can stop anywhere and you can start anywhere. This is history.
History.
Big hands of applause.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you for coming and listening.